pilgrims are on the road. They're going somewhere. And sometimes the road is hot and dusty. Sometimes it's cold and wet and muddy. And if we see a stand of trees beside still waters, we might be tempted to get off the road and go sit under the trees. Well, if we do that, we suspend the pilgrimage. We have to get back on the road. A pilgrim has to stay there and keep going. And in Lent, this conversion and renewal is more about the journey than any kind of arrival, though Easter's the goal. Well, this is a time of healing, and for that I want to go to the Bible. While it can bring comfort, Jesus says, I give you peace, my peace, not the world peace, but mine. It's a different kind. If you're familiar with music and with the organ, there are pedals, there are 2 or 3 keyboards, and melodies are taking place, counter melodies, but under the feet is a very abbreviated keyboard. You play it with your feet. They're called pedals, and there is such a thing as a pedal point. For instance, the organist will make a chord of some sort with 2 feet, and it's very, very low. And then above that, the melodies and counter melodies are going on, and they are the point of most interest. But that pedal point, that deep sustaining note or chord, it fades in and out. It's there. And then you kind of lose track of it, and you're listening to the melody lines. There's that pedal point support. Well, to me, the peace that Christ gives is more like that than the peace that comes and goes in a kind of ephemeral way. And in fact, I consider that monastic peace. It's just there, and you can plug into it. You may lose track of it, but it's in you, it's there. That's the peace of Christ for me, anyway. Well, the process of healing is not very pleasant, either bodily or spiritually, but we all know that the alternative is worse. So let's enter into the healing. And with that, I want to read a short scene from Mark's Gospel. It's chapter 14, verses 3 through 9. And I'm taking it from the RSV, the Revised Standard Version, if I can find the Bible. I don't see the Bible. The Bible's around here somewhere. Forgive me for misplacing the Bible. I think it's probably a chair if Rocio or Chris can find that. There's the Bible. It isn't sitting in the chair over there. Red thing. No? Okay. No, just give me that. That'll work. Thank you. Okay. So here's the short passage and the scene. You're probably familiar with it. It's the anointing at Bethany. While he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at table, a woman came with an alabaster jar of ointment of nard, very costly. And she broke open the jar and poured the ointment on his head. But some were there who said to one another in anger, Why was this ointment wasted in this way? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and the money given to the poor. And they scolded her. But Jesus said, let her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has performed a good service for me. For you always have the poor with you, and you can show kindness to them whenever you wish. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in remembrance of her. Jesus isn't saying that it's okay to have the poor with you. It's just a nod to reality. But this reading is really about something else. Did you notice that she broke the bottle? It's something that could be easily missed. But stop to think about it. She has chosen to pour out all the precious ointment worth a year's wages. And as the text emphasizes, it is very costly. She can't report it. She can't save it. She has to pour it all out. Her loving act runs deep. Well, when I use this story for group Lectio, following about 5 minutes for people to reflect on the story, which I would have read to them, and I ask them to reflect on how they feel, not think, not analyze, but feel. And we share it. And it's interesting to hear how differently the same story affects different people. It can evoke, particularly some women, into anger because of the way she's treated by the men. She's not supposed to be there. She's breaking all the norms of correct behavior to be there among that bunch of men. Someone else might be moved by her love. Perhaps it evokes a warm feeling in someone because of the way in which Jesus, in his compassion, defends her. But for me, it can open up a window into a level of my own love for Jesus. Can I break the bottle of what is most precious for me? Am I able to let go and sacrifice something I selfishly hold dear? That's a normal part of the human condition. But this story challenges me to give all to Christ, especially in my commitment to others. It's a work in progress. The goal is to love unconditionally, as Jesus did. Well, I don't know if any of us can get there in this life, but God doesn't require success. He simply invites us to faithfulness. And even if our attempts are compromised by weakness, mine will be, I presume yours probably will, we have committed to the pilgrimage. Complete success is probably beyond reach in this life, but faithfulness is always possible. Lent is a time to strive for faithfulness, and when we fall, Christ will help us up. Grace can carry us through, and we become more open to grace by cultivating a deeper prayer life. As Father Thomas has said, God's first language is silence. And Lectio, if you're familiar with it, the word lexio from the Latin means reading, but we're trained to read with the mind, and it would be better to translate lexio in this sense as listening with the ears of the heart. There is a saying that grace builds on nature. God will supply the grace you need in your own way, according to who you are, to follow the example of this woman. The example of her attitude, her capacity to empty self. So think of Lent as a pilgrimage. Consider yourself to be the precious ointment in the bottle of you. What do you want to do with it this Lent? Thanks. This is my presentation. If you have any questions, any discussion about anything, I'm very happy to become a part of that. So I'll leave it up to Chris to set that, however he does that, for you to ask.
Thanks, Father Micah. Yes, if you want to ask a question, please just unmute yourself and you can ask them directly, or if you would just like to ask during the chat, I think that would be great.
Okay, I didn't quite catch that if you were talking to me, but.
Yeah, Father Micah, I was just saying that we're going to do two things. Either they can ask you directly over Zoom, or they can ask in the chat the questions.
Oh, yeah. Well, if they can ask in person, that'd be the greatest. Can they do that?
Yes, they definitely can. So if anybody wants to ask in person, just unmute yourself and ask. Any questions out there?
Father, I can say something. It's not necessarily a question, but I'm just to acknowledge you for the image or the metaphor of Lent being a time in which we are on a pilgrimage, and what we might encounter on a pilgrimage. It's not always going to be nice weather. Sometimes it's going to be challenging, and I just want to say it's a very valuable image for me, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm trying to think, maybe you can elaborate on this a little bit. I'm still playing around with capturing what you said about, whether I'm the bottle in which the ointment is in, or am I the ointment in the bottle?
Yeah. If I'm the bottle, I'm also what's in the bottle. Now that's something that doesn't follow logic. It follows mystery, I suppose, and that's what the spiritual journey mostly is. In terms of that pilgrimage image, Vatican II emphasized that we are a pilgrim church, a pilgrim people. That means we're on our way somewhere. We're not static. We're going. And in fact, I see Pope Francis as trying to lead that. Let's keep going. If you may not remember, it depends on how old you are. I'm pretty old. So there was a comic of a guy who, an old cowboy who rode a beat up old horse named Paint. And when he wanted to go, he'd say, "Hi, old Paint, let's go where we ain't." Well, even if Paint is kind of broken down and the cowboy is pretty well along the trail, they can still go. And as I said, grace builds on nature, and God knows what nature is better than you do. So just keep going. Pilgrims don't have to go a long way. We just have to keep going.
Father Michael, we had a question from Rosa. She said, why do you think that Christ chose a woman to show that she could break herself, the bottle, but not the apostles?
And do that again.
Yes. Why do you think that Christ chose a woman that she could break herself, the bottle, but not the apostles?
But not what?
But not the apostles.
No, this story, it's about who Jesus is. And though it doesn't intend to belittle social justice issues, it's about her pointing out to everybody in this story who Jesus is, and she understands something that Jesus' closest followers have difficulty understanding in all the Gospels, and that is he doesn't fit the job description of the Messiah. They weren't expecting Jesus, the Messiah, to be somebody like Jesus who hasn't come to clear out things and make everything okay. And he has a terrible time trying to get them to understand, no, this is what I mean. For example, there is a Muslim woman, a doctor, who in questioning about violence, nonviolence, she asked, well, she brought up, doesn't Jesus say violence is okay? Doesn't he say that it's enough to have this sword? Well, this is in John's gospel when Jesus is being arrested. And this big cohort of soldiers comes, and one of the apostles, well, they're called disciples in John, has a sword, and he says, I have this sword, he says to Jesus. And Jesus says, enough. In other words, this sword is enough to hold off a whole cohort. And besides, hasn't Jesus been talking about not doing that kind of thing? It's almost a burlesque. So really what Jesus is saying is enough already. You just don't get it. And so in this scene that I read, she understands. She's anointed, as Jesus said, she has anointed me for my burial. And those men there don't get it. Why didn't they sell this and so on? It's about understanding who Jesus is and who it is we're trying to follow. Now, I hope that helps.
Got another question for you. Why do you think it's so hard to let ourselves be healed?
Well, for one thing, it's the unknown. None of us is completely healed, and to be healed, what's that? How much does it cost? It's kind of scary to think of being healed. The unknown, even though we believe in it's being good and we hope for it, why do we hold back on it? Because we don't really know what it is, but we know the process. As I said, healing isn't a pleasant exercise. Healing costs, but the alternative is a lot worse. They haven't yet come up with an anti-itch pill healing bodily. They've sent things to Mars and the moon, but no anti-itch pill and no decent cup of decaf. And so I guess that's why am I resistant to healing? Yeah, it'll cost. It will. And, I'm kind of a penny waste and things costing me a lot, but I know I have to do it. So I guess there's resistance.
Having had 2 knee replacements, healing is not easy. It's not easy getting up in the morning. It's not easy doing those exercises. So healing is not easy. I'm just agreeing with you.
I didn't catch it.
Yeah, could you say that again?
Yeah, I'm saying to Father Micah, I agree with him about healing not being easy after having 2 knee replacements. You know, what you have to do in order to heal, you know, to do the exercises, to, you know, flex those knees. It is not easy.
Yeah.
But like Father said, the alternative is a lot worse.
Yeah. And we know the alternatives. We've been through them probably.
Father Michael, we have another question. Especially you being in the monastery, has this Lent season been different for you due to COVID and this pandemic? Has it been anything different than you've experienced before?
Not in terms of COVID, other than we can't share personally our liturgy with people out there. But that's been going on for a year, and it's helped us to realize how much we miss you. But I'm looking at this Lent with a certain amount of joy. I've been looking forward to it. Is it to make up for other times? Well, yeah, but there's something more. It's a time of transformation, and I want to be transformed. I'm a convert, and I decided to become a Catholic because I want to be a monk on Ash Wednesday a long time ago. And Lent was that time of conversion. Well, I thought it meant to convert. And it can, and it did for me, but conversion is an ongoing process. And it means, well, conversion means to turn around. And at that point, my life turned around. So Lent has always been a special time for me. Whether the pandemic or not, I just wish we could share it a little more with the rest of you. Lent means moving. Pilgrims are on the move, and I don't want to be static. I can't run as fast as I used to, but I can walk.
Great.
Father Michael, we have another question. What are some unique ways that the brothers participate in Lent?
Yeah, I didn't try that again.
So
What are some unique ways that the brothers participate in Lent?
Oh, okay. Well, we place great hardship on ourselves. We don't eat dessert. It's left pretty much up to us as individuals as to what things we want to do. One of the traditional monastic things, and we do that, is we select a book, and it comes right out of the rule of Benedict. Submit it to the abbot and say, okay, this is the book we would like to read for Lent. And it'll be a special book, and this is our spiritual reading or lectio for Lent. It's a special one. And he approves of it. We sit around and he passes the books we've chosen out and then prays over us in our journey, our pilgrimage this Lent with that book. So that's a very key thing, because the monastic life is really about prayer. It used to be, and this is the Trappist name is our nickname. It's not a real name. We're Cistercians, the order of Cistercians of the strict observance. But the old Trappist idea was asceticism, very high asceticism. The Trappists were known as the Marines of the church, the gung-ho, stuff. You can read that in
Father Thomas.
But there was a real shift after Vatican II, and the order has decided that what it wants to proclaim is that our lives as monks and nuns are ordered to contemplation. The contemplative dimension is really what our life is about. Yes, there's the ascetical stuff, but that's not the purpose. Asceticism has as its purpose freedom, not punishment. I grew up in a little town, and in the bowling alley, they had these plaques with funny sayings and pictures on them. I remember one in particular. It was a hillbilly, and he's saying, "I don't have nothing, I don't need nothing, I don't want nothing, I'm perfectly happy." Well, that's something to laugh at, but if you stop to think about it, that guy's free. He doesn't have these wants that have been instilled in him by saturation advertising. He doesn't seem to think he needs a lot. That's pretty free. And I would say for an addictive society, that's a pretty good plaque. I didn't think of that when I was a kid, but I've thought about it a lot since then, and there's a lot of unintended wisdom in it. So everything we do in Lent is a concentration or a distillation of it is oriented toward getting closer to God. And if God's first language is silence, then look for more silence and more listening, more lectio. I hope that helps.
All right, another question. Can pilgrimage be undertaken with someone, or is it one of those things that can only be truly done solo? If pilgrimage can be taken with someone, what's the best way to be pilgrims together?
Okay. If you have someone who is willing to make this trip with you, you're very lucky. It's great. Sometimes couples will do that. Sometimes one will be in, say, the center movement and the other won't. Well, there may not be an active support in that as there would be if both were in it. But if one is supportive from sort of from the outside, that's fine. To go anywhere alone is very difficult. And while there are monastic vocations in which people may be suited to doing things rather hermit-like, that's fine, but not many are. Most of us need others. And so if there's someone else who can make the journey with you, great. You know, in AA, you get a sponsor, and the sponsor makes that journey with you. It's very, very helpful. There's an old monastic joke about a monk who is living in community for 20 years. He finally gets permission to go be a hermit. That's what every monk, just about every monk wants, because we're living cheek to jowl 24/7, and we come from disparate places, different educations, different prejudices. Our mothers cook potatoes differently in the right way. So yeah, I just like to go and be on my own. So he got permission. He went out, and he was a hermit for 20 years. And after 20 years, he came back. And one of the other monks asked him, "Why did you come back?" And he said, "I'm not ready to be a hermit. Most of us need others. So if you can find someone to make the journey with you, good. If you can't, God will give you the grace to do what you need to do in order to get closer to it." That's the hope.
All right, this were your first or only or last Lent. Would you be doing Lent differently right now?
Okay. I'd like to think I would, but I probably wouldn't. I'm me. I am where I am. One of the first monastic retreats I ever attended, a group retreat, a long time ago. I remember in one conference, the retreat director, a priest from another monastery, he said, "Love your past. It's the road you took on which God found you." Well, he's finding me on this path that I'm stumbling along, and as long as I keep going, as long as I know that I'm not giving up on my pilgrimage, I think I will rest. So I don't know that I would do it differently. I'm not sure I would know how to. There's a saying by an anonymous Trappist about, let's see if I can get it right. After all that's done and said, I can only bow my head and beg for your forgiveness. Yeah, but forgiveness is there. And so it's not really heavy unless you leave out, but he forgives. So I suppose it would be useless for me to think that I could do things a whole lot differently. But as I said, grace builds on nature, and it's coming out of my nature. I just have to go with that.
Appreciate that.
Any other questions out there?
Another question. Can you tell us more about your initial conversion and how it happened?
I opened up Pandora's box. Well, I can. I was a Protestant kid, but I got into the arts, comparative arts, and when I was 16, I became a deist. Well, see, that's the year when you study the transcendentalists, Emerson and Thoreau and so on. And I decided I was a deist. And by the time I was a sophomore in college, I was an agnostic. And that stayed, and really the substitute for religion for me was the arts. And one day in grad school, I realized, no, this isn't working. It isn't going to enable me to answer the great big why. And I realized that's what I was using the arts for. And that's asking quite a bit of the arts. Some people can do it, but I think most people probably can't let the arts alone be that forum chasing the great big why that all people have always asked at all times. So it led to a mystical experience when I was really at the bottom. And I had an experience of, I think, the risen Christ. It wasn't esoteric. It was just very calm, very quiet, very silent. And I realized my life is about God. It's not about art. And so I stopped in my academic work, and someone gave me Merton's The Seven-Story Mountain, and I was on my way. I liked what he said about life and the way of life that he lived. So I decided to look at the Catholic Church, because if you want to be a monk or a nun in the contemplative way in the Western Church, you have to be Roman Catholic, pretty much. Not totally, but pretty much. So that's why I, through the Human Center, I'd never been baptized, so I was baptized. And 3 months and one day after that, I entered a Benedictine monastery. And after 16 years, I transferred here because I was looking for a more contemplative life than most of the Benedictines did, which isn't to say anything bad about Benedictines. So that was really it. I discovered the forum I needed in which to chase after the great big why. To me, the church isn't a repository of answers. For me, it is a needed context within which to pursue the questions. I think that's legitimate, but different people find different elements in the church that help to support them. So whatever works is good. Mhm.
Was there a Lent that you'll never forget? What made it so memorable?
Okay. Yeah, an interesting Lent that I had years ago when I was a Benedictine. It was in South Dakota, and we had a drought. It started like in May, and it rained for like 5 minutes one day. That was it, nothing else. We had a farm, so it was a wipeout. And Ash Wednesday in February, I was awakened that night by rain pelting against the window. Now, it doesn't rain in February in South Dakota, but it did, and it broke the drought. And that Lent was the end of the drought and the beginning of new life. And so, though I don't remember a lot of specifics about that Lent, I went into it, Ash Wednesday, with a sense of renewed hope that Lent broadcasts something good, not some heavy thing. So I guess that's the one I remember the most because of that end of the drought, beginning of the fields growing again in a couple of months.
So in a follow-up to that question, how many years have you been at this month, and how many years have you been at Snowmass?
Well, I've been at Snowmass for, let's see, somebody'd have to use his math. I'm not good at it, but I came in 87. And I was a Benedictine 16 years before that. So it's almost 50 years. It'll be 50 years,
40 years.
sometime this year. I think my math's about right. So it's been a long time.
And then would you equate the Lenten season to the precious ointment? And is the process of healing the broken jar?
What was the first one?
Would you equate the Lenten season to the precious ointment? And is the process of healing the broken jar? Now think about that one.
I'd say you could do that. I hadn't thought of it, but use your imagination. You know, if it sounds to me as though someone has, and if that works, great. We can all think of a particular way because we're different people. But I like your image. If it works, go with it.
Oh, Micah, somebody asked. Sorry for the background. Somebody asked, what is one thing that you would leave us with today that could help us with healing? Is there one thing that within Lenten practice, whatever, that we could be healed?
Mhm. Mhm. Jesus said that he has come for sinners. He said the righteous, they don't need help. A doctor comes for people who are sick. Well, I mean, we all are. We're going to die. Why? Well, something has gotten into the human condition in which ultimately it leads to death. So something's wrong. You can't heal yourself, in other words. Be open to letting God heal you. And that means open. Remember that broken jar. Be broken open. so that you don't seal in your own brokenness, but there's a passage where for the Holy Spirit to go in and out of you. And I think that openness, that dropping of resentments, dropping of anger, and also dropping fear. I mean, a lot of things there are in life to be kind of scary, but they don't have to be scared, but don't be afraid. Be not afraid. I've come from you. So that openness is what enables the Holy Spirit to heal you, and you become the receptor rather than the instigator.
That was beautiful. Our last question, somebody was asking about your relationship with Father Theophane when he was here. Do you remember any great story from him, or how he impacted you basically on being a monk, or maybe a Lent experience?
Yeah. Oh yes, I remember Theo very well.
And how about Brother Bernie?
To say what it is that it was the most inspiring about Theophane for me, and that is the way he died. He showed us how to die. It was great. He embraced it beautifully, and he'd come out into the gift shop because he'd been in charge of the gift shop, bookshop here, and visit with people in his wheelchair. And only a couple days before he died, he was at somebody's house watching a football game. He simply embraced it as a part of life and didn't fight it. No, embraced it. That was what was most inspiring to me, and others said the same thing. He just helped us see how to die. And since we're all going to do it, it's good to know how to do it. And he helped.
All right, I think that's it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Father Micah.
Okay, welcome. Thanks, everybody.
And just a reminder, this will be recorded and up on snowmassbookstore.com on our YouTube channel. And Sunday, we'll have live mass on YouTube. Next Wednesday, we have Father Terry, and he will bring a message for us and a reflection. And then also on March 20th, Father Terry will be doing his third series of Solitude and Silence. If you want to learn more about centering prayer, this is the meeting to be at. He's